Oh boy. He's going to take over the piano.
Good morning. That's an energizing start to our service. Thank you, Deb. Welcome everyone to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where we we join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Welcome, as always, to all of you to this space. We embrace all that you bring with you, your uniqueness, your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, your differences. All that helps make you who you are is welcome here this morning. And this includes those of you who are worshiping in person with us this morning, as well as those of you who are live streaming with us. It's so wonderful to have all of you as well. So thanks to all of you for being here. Before we greet one another, I do have just a few announcements I want to let you know about. Firstly, a big thank you to everybody who was involved in yesterday's Pride Parade to represent our congregation at such an important show of celebration and solidarity in our community. And to all the volunteers who worked at our booth afterwards, thank you for that. And a big special thanks to the members of our Social Justice Coordinating Council for organizing this and for all of your hours of work yesterday too. So appreciate it very much. And then today, it turns out, is Race Amity Day. Julie, you know what this is. You've heard it, you read about it. Okay, good. Is Julie and everyone else like, what is it? What did he just say? Would you repeat that? Yeah, Race Amity Day. It's and so this is something that apparently 2 U.S. states have already adopted, as well as counties and cities increasingly across the nation. Race Amity Day is when we recognize and celebrate those moments in our history where Americans were able to overcome racial prejudice through association, amity, and collaboration. And if you want to learn more about it, our NAUA, or North American Unitarian Association Academy, is going to be hosting a program, Race Amity, America's Other Tradition. That's going to be on Tuesday, July 18th from 4:30 to 6:30. Again, you can access that by going to the NAUA website, and the link will be there. And this is going to be presented by Dr. Joyce Francis, who's a regular attendee on our Zoom, as well as a host for our Zoom on our first service. And Joyce taught international affairs at George Mason, Tulane, and American University, and is actually a member of Friends of Race Amity. So if you want to find out more about that, mark down that date, July 18th, 4:30 to 6:30 Pacific time. All right, now, today also happens to be a first for us. We are going to, on the second Sunday of each month, invite somebody from one of our committees or teams to come up and tell you why their team is the best team in the church, and you should become a part of it. So very happy to have Tom Mosier, who is the leader of our ushers team. Tom, welcome.
Well, good morning. Something really neat happened at the Pride Parade booth yesterday. I got to talking with several people who were there, and I asked 5 people, would you consider joining our usher team? And 5 people said yes. So that means we only need about 5 to 6 to 7 more in order to fill it out, so that each person would maybe only have to do once a month or once every 6 weeks. So my pitch is that you would consider that very light duty, but it's really important, because who do we see every week at church? An usher. Handing out a program, collecting the offering, and most of all, which maybe many of you who are here regularly don't know so much about, is singling out new people, identifying them, going up to them, and making them feel welcome. And we have a welcoming team that does some of that too, but the ushers can do a lot of that, and that helps build our community and interest people in wanting to come back. I can't say much more than that, except it's a valuable team. It's present every Sunday morning, and we need about another 5 to 8 people in order to fill out our ranks. So I will be in the back, and I have a sign-up sheet. What's involved is getting your email address and your name, and Sue Sturritz sends out an invitation approximately every 2 months in order to plan the next 2 months, and you can choose which service you want to be at. And for the beginning part, we'll be matched up with a more experienced usher, and also we'll have an usher training session sometime in the next 4 to 5 weeks in order to get a little down to the details that go beyond just simply collecting the offering. So please consider that. We need you, and we will be welcome and have a lot of fun while you're doing it.
All right, thank you, Tom, and thank you to our ushers who have a very important role in our Sunday services. So we appreciate that and would love to have you join the team. So let's take a couple of minutes now, as is also our tradition on Sundays, to greet one another. All right, and as always, I hope you'll stay around during our social hour to continue the conversation, but let's move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
Our opening reflection this morning is on the theme of equity and equality, and I wrote what I thought was the difference between equity and equality, but you're going to get a much deeper impression after the sermon. But this is what I thought of. You most likely have heard this famous poem by William Carlos Williams about the plums. This is just to say I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were so delicious, so sweet, and so cold. Let's say it was 3 plums. Suppose in my refrigerator I have 3 more sweet plums and I gave them all to you. That's equality. We each got 3 plums. Now suppose I gave you 3 lemons instead of plums. That would be equity. We each got 3 pieces of fruit, right? But wouldn't you be disappointed to have sour lemons instead of sweet plums? Equity is not the same as equality. I hope that this is just one little taste, and I know that you will have another dimension when you hear from Todd later.
Our first in-service song is out of our turquoise hymnal. It's called How Could Anyone, 1053, so you can also access the screen. This one was written for all of us to internalize, but certainly and especially those who have been marginalized by whatever means. So please stand as you're willing and able to sing this with me.
We'll now kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds. And we will begin as we have been, lighting a candle on behalf of the people of Ukraine and that part of the world that are being most devastated by the violence there. And we do have a candle of celebration to light this morning. Church members Dell and Nancy Avery celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary 2 days ago on June 9th. So when you see them, congratulate them. And you know what I said, I didn't even know that you were 50 years old. So definitely young for having been married 50 years. So congratulations to Dell and Nancy. I think they're away celebrating, but be sure and congratulate them when you see them. So let's take a moment of silence now on behalf of others that you might be thinking of, and as always, you're welcome to name them aloud if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. And we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which helps sustain this community and our mission to the larger world. Thank you, Maura. What a lively song to play. Thank you. Somebody's looking at you.
He's looking at the floor.
I think he's looking at you. Time for our story for all ages. Does anybody want to come up and for the story for all? Yeah, great. Come on up. All right. All right, we've got some more coming. I brought a friend as usual, so that'll help us out. Looky here. Hey, it's our old friend Avery Mann. Avery, it's been a while since you've joined us. Seems like the last time you were here, you were looking to find the right career. Have you figured that out yet?
Yes, I decided to become a professional baseball player.
A professional baseball player. Well, are you getting the swing of it?
You're never going to win in America's Got Talent with jokes like that.
Well, I guess there goes that dream. Okay, so bad puns aside, I had no idea actually you were even an athlete.
No, it's completely new to me.
Completely new to you. Okay, so it's completely new, and you want to be in the major leagues, but I take it you're not in the major leagues yet. Are you playing in the minors league?
Well, not exactly.
I see, the little leagues.
Well, the littlest league.
Oh, okay, so you really are just getting started. So how are you liking it so far?
Well, I'm not sure it's going to work out.
Well, why not?
Well, it's just not fair.
It's not fair? What do you mean it's not fair?
Well, last game,
Yeah?
they threw 3 dolls to the dad or the Thorny,
Uh-huh.
and they let him hit the third doll, and run to third base.
Well, they let him.
Yeah, but when I was at the dat, they struck me out on the third doll.
Oh my gosh, Avery, they didn't let him hit the ball. He hit the ball because he's a good player.
Well, they must have felt bad about it.
Why is that?
Well, because the next time I was up, they gave me Thor dolls and then let me walk to third base.
Well, I don't think that was because they were being fair.
Well, I thought they were. The next thing you know, they let the guy ahead of me. The next time I was up, they let the guy ahead of me run all the way home. They need to get off the field after I walked to second. It's just not fair.
So you walked to second, you didn't run to second.
Well, just like I walked at first. It's not fair.
Okay, I see. Anything else?
Well, yes, after the game was over,
Uh-huh.
they named Fast Eddie the most valuable player.
Well, what's wrong with that?
Well, he was the most valuable player the last game, too. When is it going to be my turn to be the most valuable player? It's not fair.
Okay, let me ask you, Avery, did you get your turn up to bat?
Lots of turns, but after that, the game is completely unfair.
Okay, you see, Avery, in baseball, everyone gets a turn to go up to bat, but after that, it's really up to you to do the rest. You'll get better at hitting the ball and running home the more you work at it and play the game. So nobody lets you hit the ball or run home. You have to do that part yourself. Do you understand?
No, I don't understand. I think baseball is unfair.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, it's just as well. Who wants to play a game where they won't let you score? I've got a new interest in mind anyway.
Oh, what's that?
Football.
Football. You think football is going to be better than baseball, huh?
Sure. In football, everyone starts at the same time, from the same line, on a level playing field. Sounds pretty fair to me.
Well, I see. You'll have to come back and let us know how that goes.
Oh, I can hardly wait until it's my turn to get a touchdown.
Okay, good luck. We'll talk to you later, Avery. All right, let's sing our children out.
Now is the time in our service for meditation, I invite you to find a receptive posture with feet on the ground, eyes closed if you wish. Take some deep breaths while I lead you into silence with this poem written and adapted by me. Golden moments. Fleeting as a feather, these golden moments enrich our lives. The dandelion growing out of sidewalk cement, the morning chorus of bird song, the contented sigh of a dog by your side, or the purr of a cat dozing in your arms, the way the moon looks between the pine trees, the lap of water on the shore, the feel of a sun-warmed flannel shirt when the air turns chilly, the happy giggles and screams of delight from children at play, the comfortable embrace of a favorite chair, and the pleasure of reading good writing, the hands held during a walk in comfortable silence, the mailbox surprise of a handwritten letter, the fact that this list really is endless, and we each can add to it. And so I think that you can think of your own golden moments as we enter into silence.
For our reading today, I'm going to invite you to join me in a responsive reading, number 557, from the back of your gray hymnal, number 557. And Deb is going to move towards the microphone, so those of you who are streaming with us can enjoy the full text of the reading, number 557. And I will turn to 557 instead of 657. And I will begin and ask the congregation to be our respondents today. All living substance, all substance of energy, being, and purpose are united and share the same destiny.
All people, those we love and those we know not of, are united and share the same destiny.
Birth to death, we share this unity with the sun, earth,
our brothers and sisters, strangers.
Flowers of the field, snowflakes, volcanoes, and moonbeams.
Birth, life, death, unknown, known, unknown.
Our destiny from unknown to unknown.
May we have the faith to accept this mystery and build upon its everlasting truth.
Good morning, everybody. Pete Seeger wrote the song I'm about to sing, "Oh, Had I a Golden Thread," long before the rainbow became, I think, an icon that suggested equality to everyone. And so I think he invented the whole idea. Wonderful singer, wonderful songwriter. Pete Seeger did this. magic strand of rainbow design, of rainbow design. In it I would weave the bravery of women giving birth, and in it I would weave the innocence of children over all the earth, children of all earth. In it I would weave the restlessness of men going ever far through the heat of blistering desert sands and blizzards of the north, of the frozen north. Far over the water, I'd reach my magic band to every foreign city, in every single land, in every land. Show my brothers and my sisters my rainbow design. Bind up this sorry world with hand and heart and mind, hand and heart and mind. Far over the water, I'd reach my magic band to every human being, so they would understand, so they'd understand. Oh, had I a golden thread and a needle so fine, I would weave a magic strand of rainbow design, of rainbow
Thanks again, Pam, for bringing Pete Seeger back to us in such a beautiful way. When Camille Foster, host of the Fifth Column podcast, was a guest on Real Time with Bill Maher a couple years ago, he said that the current emphasis on racial equity is something that is rather new, but seems to have taken the country by storm. We do hear it a lot nowadays, even though just a few years ago we seldom, if ever, heard the term at all. Equality has been the word that we've used to describe the type of justice we want for everyone in our society, especially for those who have been most often excluded from its benefits. Although they sound similar, they are not synonymous, or at least have not been used synonymously. Yet equity has largely supplanted equality in today's nomenclature. The familiar acronym DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion, not diversity, equality, and inclusion, for example. On the day of his inauguration, January 1st, 2021, President Biden signed Executive Order number 13985, better known as Advancing Racial Equity and Support of Underserved Communities through the Federal Government. It says the federal government should pursue a comprehensive approach to advancing equity for all, and affirmatively advancing equity, civil rights, racial justice, and equal opportunity is the responsibility of the whole of our government. Because advancing equity requires a systematic approach to embedding fairness in decision-making processes, executive departments and agencies must recognize and work to redress inequities in their policies and programs that serve as barriers to equal opportunity. So that sounds like a significant and valuable way to begin a presidency, but I wonder why not use the word equality, which we are already familiar with, to describe what he's getting at rather than equity. They sound so similar and are used in response to the same kinds of injustices that it seems like they must mean the same thing. But in a November 1st, 2020 campaign tweet, soon-to-be U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris explained, there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equity suggests, everybody should get the same amount. The problem with that, not everybody's starting out from the same place. So if we're all getting the same amount, but you started over here and I started out over here, we could get the same amount, but you're still going to be that far back behind me. It's about giving everyone the resources and the support they need so that everyone can be on equal footing and then compete on equal footing. Equitable treatment means that we all end up in the same place. So on its surface, although a bit convoluted, that explanation sounds pretty good, and I didn't think much about the distinction until 3 years ago after having dinner with a local activist who said with some anger, I hate the word equality. I think it should be obliterated from the English language. Equity is the word we should now be using. He then asked if I understood the distinction, which I did. But I also thought equity was supposed to coincide with equality, not replace it. That's when I began paying more attention to the meaning of the terms, at least as they're being used, along with their differences, and began to ask myself, does equality still matter? The first thing I did was look into their etymology, only to discover that they aren't that different and could easily be used synonymously. Equality comes from a Latin word referring to things like surfaces and numbers that are level and even, and became the root of the old French word equalité that was first applied to social justice during the French Enlightenment and has been the term used ever since in the struggle for equal rights. During the French Revolution, women's suffrage, racial equality, equal opportunity, marriage equality, and so on. Equité is another French word from the 14th century that is also rooted in the idea of evenness, but was more directly used to refer to evenness or even-handedness or fairness in human relations. And that's kind of been the distinction in our society. Equality tends to be used by those involved in social justice activities, wanting equality between people, and equity was then preserved for attorneys and Wall Street to really concentrate more on numbers. But otherwise, they're pretty synonymous. So the terms are not etymologically very different, although equity, again, has not been widely used in our society until recently. And I believe it is this relative unfamiliarity with the term that is the reason it's now being used to replace equality. As a word that sounds similar enough to it, many of us might not notice the subtle shift away from equality, although those pushing it admit, as Harris says, there's a big difference. Enough of a difference for at least one person to admit that he hates equality, wants it to be obliterated from speech and replaced with equity. So the Unitarian Universalist Association is doing something similar these days by replacing the word liberal with liberation. Ours has long been defined as a liberal religion. Now they are calling it a liberating religion. They sound similar enough to be almost indistinguishable, but they represent very different approaches. Liberalism refers to a particular value system and way of life that determines how we go about achieving our aims. Liberation refers only to the final outcome of our aims and says nothing about how we should go about achieving them. The same is true with how equality and equity are now being used. Equality, especially as it has been used since the Enlightenment, has been a product of liberal values and is achieved by promoting and adhering to those values: human dignity, freedom, reason, and tolerance. Equity, as a linguistic tabula rasa for many of us, a blank slate, only refers to the aim of equality, not to how we get there, let alone how such equality of outcome can possibly be maintained. Although it should be synonymous with equality, equity is being used to refer to achieving particular outcomes no matter how they are achieved. When this happens, when ethics focus primarily on outcomes, the ends can be used to justify the means. Whatever it takes, no matter what we ruin in the process or whose rights get trampled on or what or who must be sacrificed, is morally necessary and thus justified to accomplish the righteous cause. Traditional notions of equality, however, being an outgrowth of liberalism, as demonstrated by the common humanity ethic of Dr. King, require us to go about social reform in a just way, in a way that reflects our humanitarian values. Hence, the word equality has become problematic for those seeking to forge ahead by any means, as has the word liberal for those seeking to force their latest utopian ideal on the rest of us. So to oversimplify the difference between what it means between these two terms as they're being used, equality refers now to equal opportunities, and equity refers to equal outcomes. A popular illustration of the latter depicts a group of kids of unequal height standing atop different sized crates so that they are all exactly the same height when looking over the top of a fence. And I think this is a good image of what it takes to accomplish equality in some cases, especially when you're talking about equal access to opportunities and benefits of our society. Some outcomes should, no doubt, be the same. Some outcomes should no doubt be exactly the same. Sentencing criminals, for example, should be the same for everyone, yet statistically we know that non-whites disproportionately receive longer and harsher sentencing than whites. Systems and rules must be put in place to prevent this kind of injustice. As a liberal, this is precisely what I believe ought to be the function of governments and laws, to level the playing field so that everyone has equal rights and equal opportunities regardless of their individual identities and ideologies. A black kid should have access to the same kind of quality public education as a white kid, or a poor kid as an affluent kid. That requires a fair public educational system, a fair and well-funded public educational system. Likewise, a gay couple should be free to legally marry the same as a straight couple can, and that requires equality under the law. But if you notice, this is not what Vice President Harris says equity means. She talks about everyone starting from the same place, that is, having an equal opportunity, so that everyone can compete on equal footing. And equal footing is good. But how can it be considered competition if, as she goes on to say, equitable treatment means that we all end up at the same place? There's no point in competing if our rules and regulations and maybe even our standards of living are artificially adjusted so that everyone ends up in the same place. If legislating such an outcome were even possible. Communist Russia and China have tried doing this very thing for decades and have failed to establish the prosperous and just societies their Bolshevik and Maoist revolutionaries originally fought for. It's been a failure to force equality on people because their spirits cannot thrive. The liberal idea of government is that they should exist to guarantee, to protect equal rights for everyone, regardless of their individual identities and, again, ideologies. Governments should thus establish laws, policies, and systems to ensure equal access to our basic needs for adequate quality food, shelter, and clothing. And these days, it is a need to have quality public education, health care, and employment or income, along with equal protection and treatment by our criminal justice system. It means regulating industries, corporations, and special interest groups so that the pursuit of their interest don't undermine the welfare and environment of the rest of us. When governments fail to accomplish these things, they are failures, at least from a liberal perspective. From a liberal perspective, the government is not the problem, it is the solution, or at least it should be. All of these things covers the bottom half of Maslow's pyramid or hierarchy of human needs. If these needs are met, then it is up to the individual, not the government, to achieve the top part. The part that can lead to self-fulfillment and self-actualization for those who wish to take advantage of the opportunities society has, or at least should have, given them. But in North America, our governments often fail to achieve their proper function, leading to some having far more advantages than others, and to some not being able to achieve their full potential through no fault of their own. Because adequate systems, laws, and protections have not been put into place to assure that they have their basic physiological needs met, let alone a safe and secure environment and a sense of belonging within the greater community. And we can go to just about any community in the country now and look on the street corners and see why ours is a failed nation, a failed government. It is because of the failure of our governments to accomplish their raison d'etre, their reason for being, which has led to social inequalities. So that liberalism must be revived today because of its centuries-old commitment to the notion of equal rights that has long fomented and sustained our social justice movements, abolition, women's suffrage, civil rights, equal opportunity, gay rights, and so on. Focusing instead on equal outcomes at the expense of individual freedom and equality cannot be the solution. This again has been proven by the worst failures of the governments in Russia and China that have already tried this approach. In 1956, social psychologist Erich Fromm complained that equality today means sameness rather than oneness. I think this is also the way that equity is now being used to suggest that everyone should end up the same amount of income, the same kind of home, the same kind of clothes, and the same kind of opportunities that cannot be granted based on merit and individual abilities, but on simple numeric evenness. In the worst cases, to cite the examples of Russia and China again, people also end up having to have the same state-mandated ideas and speech. And, if you go over to Eastern Europe and look at the communities there post-communism, you see a weird blend of architecture. You see those old pre-communist buildings that are beautiful and tragically being destroyed in Ukraine right now. Architecture second to none. Then you have the communist concrete blocky buildings that are mammoth, that everybody lived in, same homes, gray concrete. You can't paint them because that would make you stand out as an individual. How dare you have a color? What are you trying to be somebody? Are you trying to be somebody different? That's not equality, right? They're equating it with sameness rather than oneness. And then you have the post-communist buildings, which are crazy looking. Because everybody said, let's just let our spirits free, and we'll build stuff that's asymmetrical and wild and distinct, and so it's really weird. But in those big concrete buildings, which are still being used for housing, people have taken, because you can't pay, these things are, how big would you say they are, Julie? Blocks long, gigantic, multi-stories, and you can't possibly paint them, but they've taken these big, I'd say 10 to 20 foot swaths and just paint a big green stripe right down one part of it, or a big yellow stripe, or whatever color they can get, to add some individuality to those buildings. And so we have to think about this when we start trying to apply these same philosophies anew, if they've already been tested, and we can see what the results have been. Because Maslow's pyramid requires us to have two parts, the basics, but also the freedom, the individual part. So that's a digression. This notion that equality means that everyone gets the same and is the same is also a rather childish way of thinking, because it seeks to make things fair, evening the score, if you will, by simply eliminating numerical differences. I remember reading a story one time where the older brother had finished his dinner and got to have a second piece of cake. And the little brother was waiting there with just one piece of cake, even though he hadn't finished his meal. And he wouldn't finish his meal because he wanted it to be fair. He wanted 2 pieces of cake. And I said, well, you got to finish your dinner first. And he just refused. And finally, in a fit of frustration, she took the knife and she went and cut the one piece of cake in half, and he was perfectly happy. Fair is fair. Now he had 2 pieces of cake. See? Childish. So a couple of years ago, for example, while I was visiting Silver Falls State Park in Sublimity, Oregon, this is a true story. I'm not writing a fantasy piece here. This is actually a place. Silver Falls State Park, beautiful place. I can't remember how many falls they have there, but 16, 20, something like that. There's a lot of them, right? I mean, you just walk around beautiful waterfalls everywhere you go. Well, anyway, I just happened at one point to pass this young boy who was shaking his fist while standing over a much smaller boy. And he said, "You're making me mad. There are no losers. Everyone is a winner." And I presume that this smaller boy had bested him in some small victory and was bragging about it, and the bigger boy didn't want to be addressed as a loser. And this is an idea that is being taught to a lot of children these days, that everyone gets a trophy or an award at the end of the competition, which to my mind makes the competition meaningless. It was also troubling to see this much larger kid shaking his fist to force his morality on the smaller kid. Authoritarianism and punitive thinking are also characteristics of the earliest and most immature stages of moral development. Equating equality with oneness, rather, means, and is more complex than cutting a piece of cake in half. Equating it with oneness means that we consider ourselves equals even amidst our differences. Right? That's what we've been fighting for. Be they differences in identity or ideology, or differences in the abilities and accomplishments that make us exceptional individuals. This is the kind of equality that allows us to be one society in which we can care for each other by seeing ourselves as one community made up of lots of different kinds of people. Equality is about putting laws and systems in place so that everyone, as Kamala Harris says, has equal footing. But it does not mean that we additionally must adjust the finish line so that everybody crosses it at once, so that we all end up in the same place. This is some of those living in those countries I've already mentioned might say amounts to a miserable existence. And I can remember during the Cold War, remember the cars and buildings and technology that the Soviet Union was known for was old and blockish. No innovation. Why would anybody innovate if you can't compete? If you can't be different, if you can't stand out, if your spirit's not free? Now, this isn't to suggest that everyone in our North American democracies are treated as equals. No, despite constitutions and other laws that declare that we are equals. But the problem is not that we aren't all exactly the same, but that too many of us, including our legislators, don't see us as one people, despite our differences. The problem is tribalism, based upon identity and ideology. It is a segregationist mindset that sees our differences as too big for us to ever surmount. Therefore, we have to stay away from each other, isolate into our own interest, and adopt philosophies of my-sidism. A simple example occurred right here in Spokane a few years ago during the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly. Attendees from all over the country gathered, probably places around the world, to march together in a public demonstration against building a new jail. But before we could begin, the organizers ranked us from front to back, mostly based upon our identities. Up front, if I recall, were all those with physical disabilities, which arguably makes sense, or is at least thoughtful. Behind them were members of the local indigenous tribes. Behind them were the people of color. Then I think the members of our local church. And so it went until all the able-bodied white people, who, let's face it, were the majority of people there, marched behind everyone else. It was at best terribly paternalistic and insulting, and at worst an extraordinary example of the kind of segregation social activists were once set on ending, not arranging. How sharply this contradicts with Dr. King's common humanity approach to social justice, which sought to end all segregation. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day the state of Alabama, whose governor's lips are presently dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, will be transformed into a situation where little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls and walk together as brothers and sisters. And walk together. This common humanity understanding of equality has gotten us far since 1963, when these words were spoken, these immortal words were spoken by Dr. King. Even if they haven't gotten us to the finish line yet. Speaking of Alabama, for instance, just this week, the U.S. Supreme Court struck a blow to race-based gerrymandering there, recognizing, just as Dr. King said, the self-evident truth that we are all created equal. This is why, in answer to my own question, I do believe equality still matters. Perhaps today as much as ever, and it should not be obliterated from our language or completely replaced with a euphemism that may result in even worse injustices. We may not all end up in the same place. Most of us may not want to. That would be a boring and meaningless existence. Why? What would life be worth if we are fed and housed and clothed and protected, yet no longer free to pursue our own purposes or to prove exceptional as individuals? How, as human civilization, might we ever advance as individuals if we are not free to innovate? Rather, we should support each other along the way, no matter how different the directions our journeys might take us or where we might end up as individuals. Although things are a lot better today than they were in 1963, we still need little black boys and black girls to join hands with little white boys and white girls and walk together as sisters and brothers. We also need people of all colors and nationalities to do the same. We need gay men and gay women to join hands with straight men and straight women. We need Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals to join hands as sisters and brothers. That's what we need. We need Russians and Ukrainians to join hands as sisters and brothers. We need Israelis and Palestinians to join hands as sisters and brothers. We need leaders, the leaders of nations like China and America, to join hands as sisters and brothers. And for that matter, we need North America to join hands with South America as sisters and brothers. Don't fence me in. For as our world has become increasingly smaller, its people are becoming increasingly divided, retreating into old identities instead of embracing our common humanity. The recognition that no matter how different we are, how far apart we might be, we are more alike than not. And now, for the whole world's sake, we need to come together as one human family, a family of equals. As Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce said 100 years ago, the earth is the mother of all people, and all people should have equal rights upon it. We've not gotten there yet, and that is why I believe equality still matters. Thank you.
Our ending song was suggested by Nancy Avery, who has been a staunch member of our social justice team for many, many years and has done much work in Spokane and I'm sure other places. So we're going to stand and sing Lean on Me, number 1021. You can access the screen or your turquoise hymnal, 1021.
Our benediction is by Barbara Hamilton Holloway. Go now in peace. Deeply regard each other. Truly listen to each other. Speak what each of you must speak. Be ready in any moment to disarm your own heart, and always live as if a realm of love had begun. So be it. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.